is one of the persons I personally admire because specifically of ethics. And when RSA collaborated with the spy agencies in the United States, MIKKO was the first person who stand up and said, I won't go ever, never to RSA conference again. And he started a parallel one fighting against what is injustice. So it's very important for me personally to have MIKKO here. Kiitos.
Kiitos.
And go ahead.
Thank you very much. And buenos dias. Thank you for inviting me, and thanks to all of you for joining us today at RootedCon. Indeed, my name is Mikko, and I've spent my life trying to protect people's online security and people's online privacy. So we have two different fights. We have a fight for security and a fight for privacy. And in many ways, it might be that we have already lost the fight for privacy. And I say that because if you go and speak to young people, let's say 20-year-old people, they don't remember a time before the internet. For them, the internet has always been there. For them, Google has always been there. Wikipedia has always been there. YouTube has always been there. For them, it's perfectly natural to pay for content, not with money, but with privacy. Because that is how we pay for content online. We want to watch a video. Well, somebody had to make that video, and making videos costs money. But we don't pay money to see the video. We pay with our privacy. We pay with our data. Data has become money. And we who still remember the time before the internet, remember that we were paying for content with money. But now that time is behind us. So we might have already lost the war on privacy. We are the first generation of people whose whole life can be monitored from beginning to end. Our moves can be monitored. Our location can be monitored. It's easy to figure out that we are all in the same room right now because we all carry these tracking devices on us. And these tell multiple parties right now that we are in the same room. It's easy to monitor where we are. It's easy to monitor who we communicate with. It's easy to monitor what we communicate about. It's easy to figure out what kind of people we are, what we are interested in. And that is all being collected. Data is the new oil. You've heard this saying before, and it is absolutely true. Data is the new oil, and that's why there are multiple parties, not just intelligence agencies, but companies collecting all this information about us, because it is so valuable. The best example is Google. Google made over $80 billion in revenue last year. 80 billion. And almost all of that came from free services. Data is the new oil. So, if we have lost the war or the fight for privacy, have we also lost the fight for security? Well, I refuse to accept that we would have already lost the fight for security as well. I refuse to accept that. Ever since I started analyzing malware and reverse engineering early viruses in the early 1990s, I've always thought that we can win this. We can win this. I mean, after all, we are fighting against bad people. We are fighting against other people, people who write bad programs, who write malware, viruses, who create botnets, who send spam, who launch denial of service attacks. And we are the good guys. I mean, we who try to protect people's security, we are the white hats. We try to fight the bad guys, the black hats. And I refuse to accept that we would be losing this fight. We have a very difficult position because the attackers have access to our defenses. Put yourselves in the shoes of an attacker for a moment. The very first thing you would do is that you would have to figure out what kind of security do you have to breach. If you want to reach a server, well, what is that server? What kind of security does it have? What kind of authentication? What kind of firewalls do they have? What kind of endpoint security is there? And then you figure out how to break through. And you can download all these programs. You can download the firewalls and the intrusion prevention systems and the intrusion detection systems and the antivirus systems and the encryption systems. And then you try to find a vulnerability. And you have unlimited time to do that. So the attackers have the benefit of time being on their side. They can spend as much time as they want to try to find a hole in our defenses. And we, the defenders, we don't have that luxury. We have to be able to find those attacks immediately, and we have to be able to block those attacks immediately. So it's not a fair war between the attackers and defenders when the attackers have access to our weapons and we don't have access to their weapons. Nevertheless, we can fight. There's multiple ways of fighting. And we almost always hear bad news about computer security. There's been yet another breach. There's been yet another leak. There's massive new vulnerability somewhere. That's typically what we hear. Or we hear news stories about users doing stupid stuff. Users using the same password everywhere. Users clicking on the wrong links. And that is very true. Users do stupid stuff. And we do have massive vulnerabilities in our systems. But if we look at the big picture, look at where we were 10 years ago, and look at where we are today. There's been massive improvements in security over the last 10 years. Massive improvements. Like 10 years ago, most end users were still running Windows XP. Windows XP, which by default did not even have a firewall, which by default exposed all the services, all the ports to public internet, which is like a bad idea. That's where we were 10 years ago. You look at the systems we're running today, you look at the latest version of OS X, latest version of Windows 10, it's like night and day to where we were 10 years ago. And when you look at the new systems that have become commonplace, smartphones and tablets with much more restrictive operating systems, clearly we are going forward. Clearly there's been massive improvement over the last 10 years. Unfortunately, the enemy keeps changing as well. If we would be fighting the enemy we had 10 years ago with today's technology, we would be in great shape. But we are not fighting the enemy 10 years ago. The enemy keeps changing. And one of the most useful things we can do is to try to understand our enemy, try to understand the different actors, the different groups out there who do these hacks. We have to understand the hackers. And this is harder to do than it sounds. Especially the typical end user has a really poor view of who are doing the attacks. They have this notion of some evil hacker doing all these things. And of course, it's not just one group. We have multiple different kinds of hackers, including white hat hackers and hacktivists and criminals, governments and even extremists. So when you look at the wide range of different kinds of hackers, there's no single hacker archetype. It's different groups. You know, guys like Charlie and Chris, who are both my friends. Clearly they are hackers, but clearly they are good hackers. They hack because they want to improve security. Hacktivists like Anonymous want to hack because they have a motive. They have a higher motive. They have a political motive or a protest motive. Criminals want to hack because they want to make money, and money is a good motive. Most of us go to work to make money. So if you can become rich by writing viruses. Of course, someone is going to do that. Governments are interested in this because cyber makes sense for governments. Cyber makes sense. Cyber attacks, from a governmental point of view, are excellent. Because cyber attacks are effective, affordable, and deniable. Affordable, effective, deniable. That's a great combination. When you think about it from the point of view of the military, that's a great weapon. When you have a weapon which is affordable, effective, and deniable, that's ideal. And that is the reason why we are right now in the beginning of the next arms race. Time to take your medication. We are in the beginning of the next arms race. We spent the last 60 years in the last arms race, which was the nuclear arms race. We're sort of out of the nuclear arms race now, sort of out of the Cold War now. And we are jumping headlong into the next arms race, which will be the cyber arms race. And we've only seen the very beginning of that. And it might very well go on for the next 60 years. And it might very well take decades until we get into discussion about things like cyber disarmament or rules of law for cyber war, things like that. And from governmental point of view, it's not only militaries who are interested in this, it's also intelligence agencies and law enforcement. If somebody would have told me 25 years ago that eventually cops will be writing viruses to infect their own citizens, that would have sounded like science fiction. But that's exactly what we're seeing today, because law enforcement around the world are using malware to do police investigations. And I don't actually have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with government using offensive technologies to investigate crimes or to try to catch terrorists. I don't actually have a problem with that. Because obviously there are bad people, and obviously in 2017 we have to be able to fight them online as well as in the real world. However, if we as citizens decide to give the rights to our governments to use offensive tools like this, then we have to demand transparency and accountability. We have to demand transparency. And with offensive cyber power, that means, for example, law enforcement publishing statistics annually, telling the citizens, for example, that last year we infected 200 citizens' computers with malware. And out of those 200 citizens who we infected, 195 turned out to be bad people who were arrested and sentenced, and 5 turned out to be innocent people. Or it could be the other way around. It could be that 195 are innocent and 5 are guilty. Right now, we don't know which way it is because there is no transparency. And we as citizens cannot make decisions on what kind of rights do we want to give to our government when we don't have that transparency. That's why transparency and accountability is so important when it comes to governments using offensive online attacks. But the biggest group out of these 5, by far, are criminals. The ones who make money with their attacks. Criminals like these guys. Here on the left, Denis Kalovskis from Latvia, the guy who was behind the Gozi botnet operation. Here in the center, Viljar Kivi, Estonian, who was running fairly large-scale phishing scams. And on the right, Yevgeny Bogachev, the brains behind Zeus, one of the most well-known banking Trojans. Both Denis and Viljar are arrested right now. They're actually both in jail right now. Yevgeny is not. Yevgeny is actually out. He's on the run. You can actually find him from Interpol's most wanted pages, where he's wanted for cyber crimes and probably also for crimes against fashion. Like, what the hell is that? You go, Yevgeny, you go. Now, one of the biggest trends in cybercrime for the last 5 years is something we all know very well, and that is ransom Trojans. And the mega trend behind ransom Trojans is Bitcoin or digital currencies. Now, blockchain is one of those innovations which seems simple and obvious once it has been invented. This is how you know that an invention is great. Because it seems obvious, but it wasn't obvious until somebody invented it. But the idea of having a public ledger of transactions maintained by a peer-to-peer network and running it so that every single transaction which is in the public ledger is, first of all, public, second of all, unchangeable. That is a very, very powerful idea. And that can be used to do tons of different things, one of which is digital currencies. So blockchain isn't bad. Bitcoin isn't bad. It's a tool. Just like cash isn't bad. We all have cash in our pockets. Cash isn't bad. Bitcoin isn't bad. They're both tools. We all need tools like these. And just like real-world criminals love cash, online criminals love Bitcoin. Most of real-world crime is done with cash. Most of real-world drug trade is done with cash. It's kind of hard to buy cocaine with a credit card. Or that's what I've been told. Exactly in the same way, in the online world, it's kind of hard to buy cocaine with a credit card, so you use Bitcoin. And for ransom Trojan gangs, Bitcoin is like a gift from heavens, because now they can get their money without getting caught. This is the reason why we've seen an explosion in the amount of ransom Trojans over the last 5 years. We are right now tracking over 110 different ransom Trojan gangs. 110 different gangs, all competing for the same customers or for the same victims. And by the way, out of those 110 gangs that we're monitoring, not all of them are from Russia. Some of them are from Ukraine. I may be exaggerating a little bit, but only a little bit. And the ways they use to reach their customers, well, their victims, used to be exploit kits. 5 years ago, when ransom Trojans started to become a big problem, it was mostly exploit kits. So you got infected with the ransom Trojan by browsing the web. And then you had old Flash or old Java runtime or QuickTime extension, and you got infected just by clicking on a link, visiting a website you know and trust, but because it was hacked today, you got infected with something like this. Over the last 5 years, this has changed, and today the most likely way of getting infected is actually getting a document in an email attachment, which is something we used to see in the late 1990s, early 2000s, when macro viruses spreading in Word and Excel documents used to be the biggest problem we have. Well, this problem has now come back. This is a typical example of a ransom Trojan bait file. It's a Word document sent to people at companies' human resources department, because HR people have to open up tons of attachments every single day. People sent their CV as a Word file or as a PDF file. And this CV comes from Cameron R. Chandler. He looks like a nice guy. He seems to have a very good CV. And the CV is so advanced, it even has active content. Please click Enable Content button to see it. And when you click Enable Content button, you actually get history of his education, So it sort of works. When you click the button, you get the content. But you also got infected. Because this button, the Enable Content button, should be renamed. Microsoft should change the name of this button. In next version of Microsoft Office, this button should read, infect my system. right? Because that's what it does. Pretty much nobody uses embedded macros in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, which are sent over the internet for anything else except infecting systems. If you do use macros, for example, some Excel users use macros to write fairly elaborate programs inside their spreadsheets. When you use macros in-house in a company, you can internally sign the macros. So then they will work inside the company without this prompt. But really, to be able to send them over the internet so that a complete outsider can click on macros, which is basically running programs. What you're doing here is that you're running a program. This is a bad idea. And people keep clicking on that button because it says enable content. And you can easily trick people to enable content. But if it would say infect my system, maybe they wouldn't click on it. So that's my suggestion. So this particular Word document will infect your system with the TBC locker, which is yet another ransom Trojan. And all these ransom Trojans actually work. I mean, if you get infected and it encrypts your computer and your network drives, and if you pay the ransom, you will get your files back. They do deliver. They have to deliver because they know that if it doesn't work, future victims will not buy. And this has created a huge competition between these gangs. In fact, in our latest threat report, we created a diagram of different ransom Trojans of the last 5 years. This gives you some kind of an idea how many different gangs there are. In fact, I can't fit them all in one slide. The full picture looks like this. It's sort of like, Tokyo subway map. This is what it looks like. This is how many ransom Trojans there are. And they come up with new inventions. Inventions like to reach new customers, they've localized their ransom Trojans. So if you get infected in Spain, it will speak Spanish to you. If you get infected in Finland, it will speak Finnish to you. So the victims are better, can better follow the orders on how to exchange Bitcoin and how to pay the ransom. But my favorite innovation lately in ransom Trojans was in a ransom Trojan which we found 2 months ago, a ransom Trojan called Popcorn. And the Popcorn ransom Trojan asks for 1 Bitcoin, which today is $1,300, something like that, close to it. And if you don't have $1,300 to pay, if you're a home user and all your pictures are encrypted, you want them back, but you don't have the money, it offers to give you your files back for free if you infect 2 of your friends. And that's brilliant. I mean, this is excellent. It's like combining chain letters with ransom Trojans or I don't know, pyramid scams with ransom Trojans. That's really creative thinking. It's kind of hard to be angry at these guys when they are so creative. So you have one victim who wants his files back and he doesn't have $1,300, so he infects 2 other victims, and they will infect 2 other victims, and they will infect 2 other victims. It becomes exponential. This is clever. And I know what you're thinking. You're immediately thinking that, okay, no problem, I'm going to infect 2 virtual machines, and then I'm going to get my files back for free. It doesn't work like that. You have to infect 2 people who will pay the ransom. When 2 people pay the ransom and they get infected through you, then it will automatically unlock your files. And the way it actually, if you look back here, it gives you a unique URL. Every victim gets a unique URL. So the idea is that you spread this URL. No, you email it to all your enemies, for example, or you post it on Twitter, and then people get infected through this unique URL. Then they will automatically unlock your files. That's the logic on how it works. Very clever, very creative. Points to Popcorn guys, whoever they are. So let's get back to that. Who are these guys? Who are the guys who do all these attacks? Well, let's talk about this guy. This is Yevgeny Nikulin. He's the guy who hacked LinkedIn, which means he stole your password, because most of you are on LinkedIn. He hacked LinkedIn in 2012. So if you had a LinkedIn account in 2012, your LinkedIn account name, your LinkedIn password, and the email address you used to sign into LinkedIn was stolen by Yevgeny. I was one of the victims because I had an account on LinkedIn in 2012. He hasn't yet been convicted or sentenced on this. He has been arrested. He was stupid enough to go on holiday with his girlfriend to Czech, to Prague in Czech Republic. He was arrested while sitting in a nice 5-star restaurant. He's now awaiting extradition to United States. So what was Yevgeny doing with that 130 million password collection? He had it for 5 years. What was he doing with it? Well, as far as we know, he was mostly selling it to other hackers. He was making money by selling it to other criminal groups. So how much money can you make by selling a collection of passwords? How much money did Yevgeny make over the last 5 years with this? I don't know. But we did find Yevgeny's social media accounts, including his Instagram, and we did find some of his videos on YouTube, which give you some kind of an idea. Let's watch this video. Can we turn the sound on? This is Yevgeny talking about his hobby.
Знаешь про свою тачку, чувак?
Я ничего лично не знаю про свою машину, и мне все равно, потому что я владелец Lamborghini.
That is a Lamborghini
Huracan and an Audi R8. And in addition of those nice sports cars, Yevgeny also has a Mercedes, an Aston Martin, a Porsche, and a Rolex. And he also has a goddamn Rolls Royce. So how much money did he make? I don't know, but he made enough, right? When you drive a goddamn Rolls Royce, you've made enough. Of course, he's not enjoying his Rolls Royce anymore because now he is under arrest. So let's keep at this. Like, okay, obviously he made his money by selling this database. But why were other criminals buying the database? What were they doing with this database? Well, one thing that we know that was happening with this database was that criminals were buying it and then they were searching this list of 130 million email addresses to find Gmail addresses and other webmail addresses. Why? Because Gmail has become the single sign-on system for the internet. Once you gain access to somebody's Gmail, you gain access to everywhere else. So the way this works is that they search the 130 million list for Gmail accounts, and let's say 1 in 10 of those is a Gmail account. That means they have 13 million Gmail accounts. Then they try logging in to those Gmail accounts with the same password, with the LinkedIn password, which of course shouldn't work, but as you know, it will work for many users. We've actually asked people about this, and around 15% of people say they use 1Password. And I don't mean 1Password, the password manager. I mean that they really only have 1Password. They use the same password everywhere, which is stupid. So let's say that 1 in 10 uses the same password on LinkedIn and Gmail. That means that the attackers end up with 1.3 million Gmail accounts where they can log in. So once they log into your Gmail, what they do next is that they search for old emails. And as you know, Gmail never deletes old emails. So they will find your old emails even if they are 8 years old. And they're looking for particular type of emails. They're looking for emails that you receive when you register an account in an online store. So if you registered an account in any online store 5 years ago, they will still find that. And now they know that you have an account in this online store with this email address. Next, they will go and try to log into that online store with the same password. And for many users, the same password will work even there. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Even if the password doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Why? Because every single login page has a magic button. Every login page has a magic button. And that magic button reads, I have forgotten my password. And when you click the magic button, what happens? They will send you a new password to your Gmail, and they already had your Gmail. So this is what I mean by saying that Gmail has become the single sign-on system for the whole internet. Once you gain access there, you gain access to everywhere else. And now they have access to your online accounts in online stores. Now they can start ordering stuff, you know, PlayStations and Xboxes and iPads, and you pay. That's how they make money. Another big challenge we have in our hands right now is the bright future of the Internet of Things, IoT and ICS, Internet of Things and industrial control systems. Pay attention. This is a nuclear reactor, and that is a nuclear reaction. Let me actually play that again, it's so cool. This is a nuclear reactor, and you are about to see a nuclear reaction. There we go. Quite cool. Why am I showing you a video of a nuclear reaction? Because this is an example of ICS in effect, industrial control systems. Because this reactor is being controlled by a PLC. And PLCs, programmable logic controllers, run our world. Every single factory is being run by ICS, being run by computers. Which means our infrastructure is being run by computers and software. The lights are on in this room because of computers and software. The lunch you will be having later today is at least partially made in a food processing plant, which is running on computers and software. And this is a big lesson for us to learn. Because we are computer security guys. I am a computer security guy. For years and years, I thought that I'm a computer security guy. My job is to secure computers. Here's a computer. My job is to secure this. And that's not my job anymore. And it's not your job anymore. We are computer security people. Our job is not to secure computers. Our job is to secure the society. That's our job. Our job is to secure the whole society. So it's time to change the way we think about computer security. It's time to change the way we think about our work. And there's so much talk about the risks of IoT and ICS, and the risks are real, and they are there for two reasons. The first is that these things end up being connected to the internet even when they shouldn't be. And the second problem is that these things are not just risky by themselves, they actually work as vectors. So you gain access to networks behind these devices. There's plenty of examples of ICS systems or factory systems which end up connected to the internet by accident. We find these all the time. We run a system which scans the whole IPv4 address range all the time, and we keep finding, you know, different kinds of factories or this is actually a power generator factory, and this is their fire control system, which means when you click this yes button, it will start putting out foam. And this is on the internet with no username and password. And that's a bad idea. That is a bad idea. Why are these online? Well, they're typically online by accident. They're typically online because originally when this steel mill was configured, this interface, they didn't put a password on it because you could only access it internally. And as long as it's only accessible internally, you don't have a security problem. But now, this is on the public net. This is a remote VNC to a steel mill with no password on it, which means anybody, you can go and start clicking on these buttons, which is a bad idea when you have 24,000 kilos of steel at temperature of 1200 degrees. And the reason why this is online is that initially it wasn't, but then somebody connected to networks or added a router or added a switch or added a bridge or set up a modem for remote access, something happened, and it ended up being online. So do you know what is this? This is a crematorium online with no username and password. It even has an option for infants, which is a bit grim. And you find people's homes, their houses, their security cameras, including their bedroom, which is a bad idea. And here's a tip for you. If you set up a security camera to monitor the state of your plants, put a password on it. That's my tip. If you set up a security camera to monitor the state of your plants, put a password on it. If you enjoy things like these, I recommend you follow a friend of mine on Twitter, Dan Tentler, aka Viss on Twitter. He keeps finding stuff like this all the time. One of my favorites is when he found curtains online. And my friends, when curtains are on the internet, when you can open and close curtains on the internet, that means that the Internet of Things is not something which is in the future. That means that Internet of Things is here today. This revolution is here today. So part of the problem is that, we can gain access to these when we shouldn't. And the other problem is that they work as vectors. So you set up an IoT light bulb in your office, or some of your employee does that. And then that light bulb becomes the vector from the outside to inside. And this is problematic. This is why we have huge issues in our hands. We keep finding IoT devices which, for example, leak the Wi-Fi password. So you set up a Wi-Fi coffee machine in your home, and then that coffee machine becomes the weakest link in your network. And then one morning you wake up and every computer in your home has been encrypted by a ransom Trojan because they got in through the weakest link. And this is one of the reasons IoT is such a headache. So we do remember the Mirai botnet, which is still a big headache for us. And I don't think that Mirai was the wake-up call that we needed. Mirai was a big wake-up call. Mirai, the botnet, was used to launch the biggest single denial of service attack on the internet, in the history of the internet, from an attack network of 120,000 IoT devices. But the users whose devices were being used to do this attack couldn't care less. They don't care. We know because we've spoken with them. We go and talk to people that your security camera was hacked and it was launching a massive attack on this DNS provider on the internet. And people tell us that, oh, really? Cool. Their camera works fine. I mean, there's no problem with it. They can use it, they can watch it, and it works. They don't care if it's being used to attack someone else, as long as it works for them. So this is not the wake-up call we needed. And by the way, Mirai is such a sad story because the way it gained access to these over 100,000 devices was simply trying default passwords. Passwords like, login admin, password admin, login root, password default, or my favorite, login mother, password fucker. It actually tries that. I don't know why it tries motherfucker, but it tries motherfucker. Maybe it is the default password for something, I don't know. And the worst part is that when it was trying to log into these IoT devices with these default passwords, we're not speaking about SSH. It wasn't trying SSH, it wasn't trying HTTPS, it tried to do these logins over, get this, it tried to do it over Telnet. Yes, Telnet. Telnet from the 1980s. Telnet, which we haven't been using to do remote administration of our computers for 20 years. Because it's a bad idea to do remote administration over Telnet, because Telnet is not encrypted. So if you log in anywhere over Telnet, anybody who's in the same network can just sniff your password. It's not even obfuscated, it's plain text. So we keep repeating the mistakes that we already fixed with our computer systems with our new IoT systems. Like, why are we bringing back Telnet in IoT? It makes no sense. Another thing that we already fixed is automatic updates. And when you look at IoT devices today, they're all running Linux kernel from 3 versions ago, and there's no way to update it, and there's no automatic updates of firmware, which is something we already figured out on our computers long time ago. And with all these problems, it right now seems to me that the Internet of Things is becoming a clear and present danger to the Internet itself. And bad default settings is big part of this problem. The fact that these systems automatically expose their admin interfaces to the public internet, the fact that you can set them up without changing the password is a big part of this problem. And this reminds me of another problem. Remember this. This is a VHS video player. And whenever you would go to your friend's house in 1980s or 1990s, they would have a VHS player in the living room, just underneath the TV. And at every friend's house, the VHS player, the display, would display the same thing. It was always displaying 12 o'clock, blinking 12 o'clock. At everybody's house. Why? Because when you start up the player, it doesn't know what time it is. So you should take out the manual and the remote control and learn how to set up the time. And nobody does that. And this is what we're doing with our IoT devices. You buy an IoT security camera and you screw it on the wall and you install the mobile app and you pair them and it works. You get the stream. It works now. Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't change anything. It works. This is what people are doing. It's exactly the same thing as we did with our VHS players. And this isn't going to change by itself. When people go and buy a washing machine, they are not asking questions about the online security features of that washing machine. Online security is not a selling point for washing machines. The most important selling point for washing machines is price. The second most important selling point is color. The third most important selling point is like how many kilos of clothes can it wash. And this means that appliance manufacturers who are now putting IoT into every device, including all washing machines, they can't afford to invest money into security of those devices because nobody's asking about those security features, and price is the most important selling point. So if they would invest money into online security, it would become more expensive. Their competitors would be selling better. And that would only improve features that nobody's asking about. So we are setting up ourselves up for failure with this model by default. And it's not gonna change itself. Vendors will not start fixing this problem by themselves. So maybe then regulation is the answer. Maybe it is. I'm not a fan of regulation. But maybe here that's what's needed. Because we already regulate a lot of things about our home appliances. When you go and buy a washing machine, you can be quite certain that it's not going to give you an electric shock because we regulate that. You can be quite certain that it's not going to have a short circuit and catch fire and burn down your house. But you can also be quite certain that it's going to leak your Wi-Fi password. And this is the problem. We already regulate the safety of our devices. Maybe we should regulate the security of our devices as well. And I'm not calling for regulation which would mandate how appliance vendors have to secure their devices. I think that's a bad idea. I think we should simply regulate that the vendors are liable for the problems they cause. So, right now, if you have a washing machine which has a short circuit, which catches fire and burns down your house, the vendor is liable for burning down your house. But if the same washing machine leaks your Wi-Fi password and every computer in your home ends up being encrypted by a ransom Trojan, they are not liable. And this is what we should change. We should make them liable for the problems their security absence creates. And that's enough, because then the vendors will invest the money, because they don't want to be liable for those problems. Maybe this will happen, maybe it won't. But I don't think it's going to change by itself. I already spoke a little bit about governments and governmental hacking. And of course, we all got a front row seat into using offensive cyber power just a couple of months ago, because there was this election you might have heard about, election in which Russia tried affecting the outcome of the presidential elections in the biggest superpower on the planet. Russia tried affecting the outcome of presidential elections in the biggest superpower on the planet. There's a very good interview with President Putin done by Bloomberg TV, and this was done in October, so way before the actual elections. But this was already the time when the DNC and Clinton email server had been hacked, and those had been released through WikiLeaks. So the interviewer asks Putin the key question, Mr. Putin, who hacked the Democrats? And Putin answers. He says, is that really important? Does it even matter who hacked it? The important thing is the content of the emails. There's no need to distract the public about who did it. There's no need to distract the public about who did it. We shouldn't be looking at who hacked it. We should be looking at the emails instead. So is this cyber war? No, it's not, because this isn't war. This is war. A couple of months ago, Ukrainian soldiers, had their Android phones infected with Android malware. And that malware pinpointed their JYP, their location in the battlefield, after which Russian artillery was shooting in those locations. So Ukrainian soldiers got killed because their phone was infected. This is what cyber war looks like. And this is happening today. Think about how big this shift has been. And I've defined a term, fog of cyber war, to define how this arms race is different from any of the previous arms races. Because when you look at traditional military capabilities, we know very well the capabilities of other countries. In fact, there are public records on the internet on which you can go and take a look at, for example, how many tanks a certain country has. How many tanks does Russia have? How many tanks? China, USA, Iran. This is public information. So with traditional military capabilities, we know exactly what other countries have. But then when we look at cyber, we have no clue. We have no clue of the capabilities of countries. Yes, we know that United States is very good. Yes, United States has been investing more money for a longer period of time into building their cyber capability than any other country. They are number one in the world in this. We know that. And we know that Israel is very good. And we know that Russia and China are very good. But then after that, it becomes very foggy. What is the offensive cyber capability of Vietnam? I don't know. What is the offensive cyber capability of Spain? I have no clue. What is the offensive cyber capability of Sweden? Beats me. This is the fog of cyber war. And this makes this arms race different from many of the previous arms races. It makes it especially different from the nuclear arms race. Because the power of nuclear weapons was not in using them. The power of nuclear weapons was in deterrence. It was in creating fear. The mankind has only used nuclear weapons in war twice. There's been 2 nuclear detonations in war. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's it. The rest of the power of nuclear weapons has not been in using them. It's been in deterrence. Because we all know which countries have nuclear weapons. There's only 11 countries in the world which have nuclear weapons. And when you know that that country has nuclear weapons, then you don't screw with that country. Because they have nuclear weapons. This is the balance of fear. But with the fog of cyber war, we have no clue on the capabilities. So the power of cyber weapons is not in deterrence. The power of cyber weapons is actually in using them. And this is why we see cases like Stuxnet or Prykarbatto Oblenergo, which was the hacked Ukrainian power company, or what I just showed you about Ukrainian artillery people getting killed. So the power of cyber weapons is not in fear or deterrence. It is in actually using them. Cyber weapons are effective, affordable, deniable. Great combination. You compare, for example, the Stuxnet operation to what could have been accomplished with traditional military power. If the goal was to delay the Iranian nuclear program, you basically have two options. Option number one, you can go to war, invade Iran, which is very costly, both in loss of life and in money. Or you can try to do a surgical strike. You send one B-52 to drop lots of bombs on one facility to try to disrupt the centrifuges doing nuclear enrichment. Or you can write Stuxnet. Writing Stuxnet probably cost US government a couple of $1 million. One B-52 bombing run costs a couple of $1 million. And the best part, they can deny Stuxnet. No, that wasn't us. We didn't do that. But when you fly a B-52, it's kind of hard to deny because everybody can see the plane which says United States of America on it. So this is what's happening now. Now earlier I mentioned that data is the new oil. And I also mentioned that Google's revenue last year was over $80 billion. Their profit was over $12 million. And almost all of that came from the free services. And that's a very good illustration on how valuable our data is. We use these free services, which cost us no money, yet somehow Google is able to make 80 billion out of that. And 80 billion, that's a bigger revenue than most oil companies have. So data really is the new oil. And just like oil brought us prosperity and problems, data will bring us prosperity and problems. The problems oil has brought us include global warming and pollution of our nature. The problems data will bring us include loss of privacy and data leaks. So if you work with oil, you have to worry about oil leaks. If you work with data, you have to worry about data leaks. So this is the world where we live today. We are all security people. We used to think that our job is to secure computers. Our job is not to secure computers. Your job is not to secure computers. Your job from this day on is to secure the society. That is your job. And we have to take that job seriously because we have a big responsibility. We probably have bigger responsibility than we ever imagined when we got interested in computer security in the first place. But we are the ones defending our societies, and our societies run on computers and software. So thank you for doing your part in securing our society. Thank you for working together with me and with all of us in this great society of computer security people. Thank you for your work. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, we have enough time for a lot of questions, so go ahead. Tenemos mucho tiempo para preguntas, así que adelante. Los que no os manejéis bien en inglés, si queréis hacerlas en español y la traduzco. ¿Vale? Thank you so much, Mikko. I have two questions.
Sure.
One of our speakers in past editions of RootedCon, Raúl Siles, give us a very interesting metaphor. We are not talking about cyber weapons when we talk about a rootkit. The cyber weapon is you and these people. This is cyber ammunition. Do you agree with this view?
Yeah, this is actually a very good way of illustrating how different these new weapons are, because they are really built on brain power. It's us, the people, who are really behind them. But it's also a good illustration of the fact that these weapons are so different from traditional weapons. Traditional weapons were only in the hands of the military. You think about fighter jets, or you think about aircraft carriers. Only militaries have fighter jets. Only militaries have aircraft carriers. But then you think about the botnet. Well, anybody, I mean, you can do a botnet. Every single person here can do a botnet. It's accessible not just to governments, but to anybody. Governments use them. Governments run botnets. But when somebody's running a botnet, it's very hard to figure out like who's behind it. And we get back to the deniability problem, because we get to the fog of the cyber war. And I had a very good lesson last month, or actually in January. In January, I was visiting Mexico City. And I had a meeting with Mexico military. I met 3 colonels and a general. And that meeting was in a military base in the center of Mexico City. And as I checked in, I got cleared to go inside. We were walking through the base with the colonels, and it was a huge base, like tons of people. And me, being the ignorant European, I asked them a stupid question. I asked them that you obviously have a big military. Who are you worried about? Like, to the north from Mexico is United States. I don't think they're going to attack you. To the south, you have Guatemala, which is very poor. I don't think you have to worry about them. Like, why do you need such a big military? And these colonels looked at me like an idiot, saying that, well, we're fighting a war with the cartels. And I was like mind blown. That, really? I mean, you're using the military to fight the drug gangs. Like in Finland, we don't have the military fighting the drug gangs. Like, why don't you use your police to fight them? And they were like, oh no, the police is way too corrupted. We can't trust them. And that is an example of, because cartels aren't government, but they do have tanks and bazookas. So in some cases, even big weapons are in the hands of the private sector, but that is an exception. What's the other question?
The other question is about ethics. An example. I work for a huge company. I need to protect my company against fraud and attacks and these kind of things. Imagine that the typical Moldavian or Ukrainian group is attacking my company. I detect one CNC. My decision is to attack back, take down the CNC. What is the ethics around this? I'm protecting my company, protecting my society, but I'm taking a weapon on my hand. I'm not authorized by society to use the force, but I'm using it to take down the CNC. Just a brief about ethics.
Complicated question. And that's something we run into in our line of work all the time. Are we allowed to strike back? How much force can we use to strike back? Is there a possibility that by striking back, we end up in jail ourselves? And we don't want to go to jail. We just want to defend our networks. Now, the way we do this in practice is that we try to shut down criminal servers by working with the providers. We let the upstream providers know that, this IP address is running a CNC. Please shut down the IP address. Please reroute the IP address. And the operator is more than happy to do it. In almost all cases, they're happy, to shut down botnets and things like that. And then there is no problem. Of course, we could launch a denial of service attack ourselves. Let's use our own botnets and let's overflow it. And that would most likely be criminal. It would get the same effect. But we would be using, power which is not supposed to be used like that. So it's a tough call. I had a very interesting discussion with our lawyers at F-Secure, because I had this idea of building booby trap systems, where the idea is that you create convincing documents and you plant them in different parts of your company network. And they're not real documents. They look real, but they're not real. And those documents, which nobody in-house uses, because they're not in the right places, they would be interesting to attackers. You can imagine a Word document titled Plans on Mergers and Acquisitions 2018, something like that. So they would be sure to download and open that. And we would plant exploits in those documents. So when some outsider downloads it and opens it, they get exploited. And then we would take a picture of them with the camera and send it back to us. And our lawyers hated this idea. They were like, no, we can't do that. That's not right. We can't attack like that. And I was like, why couldn't we? I mean, we're not telling them to like open these files. They open them voluntarily. And our lawyers told me that, there was a court case with some guy who had his summer cottage broken into repeatedly. So eventually he set up a shotgun which was connected to the door. So the next time somebody broke in and opened the door, they were killed. And the guy who set this up was sentenced for murder. So this is the court case they pointed me to, that we don't want to do that. So these are tough questions. Do we have any easier questions?
Hi. Hello.
Hello,
Okay.
please wave so I can see where you are.
Yes, just have one question,
Oh.
and I would like to know what you think about teach all these things in a school. I think it's very important learn these kind of things, the security to the children.
Yeah, absolutely. Because with the next generation is growing up, and we have to be able to make them a better generation than what we are. One of the big challenges we have is education. You can look at all the computer security problems we have, and you can divide them into either technical problems or people problems. Technical problems, in theory, are easy to fix, because technical problems, in the end, are bugs, programming errors in the code. So we fix the bug, we update, and we're done. But then when it's a people problem, we can't patch people. There's no update to fix our brains. And if there's one thing I've learned over the 26 years that I've worked in this space, is that education never works. People never learn. You can tell them as many times as you want not to double click on that attachment, or not to follow that link, or not to put your password into every form, and they will always double click that attachment, they will always follow the link, they will always give their password to anybody who asks for it. So in many ways, education seems like a waste of time. So what is the solution then, if we can't fix people's brains? Well, the solution is that we are the dinosaurs. We will grow old and we will die. And the next generation is going to grow up, and it's going to be a better generation, because they will grow up on the internet. Things like these will be easier for them. So the solution is that we have to die. Sorry. More questions? There's a question right there, please.
Hi, Mikko. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Just a second, please stand up so the speaker can see
Yeah.
you, okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Really nice concepts about this world war. And you say the concept about data is the new oil, but when you talk about oil, we have some benefits, like you have oil in your kits and in your car. What kind of oil we have for us? Because they're taking the data for us, but we are not seeing any benefit. And also, who are these buyers? Because you know who are the buyers of oil, or you might guess, but who are the buyers, the real buyers? Because we don't, for example, in my case, I do not know any witness that says, okay, Google has this revenue because he's selling to NSA. Where are the witnesses of that?
We do get benefits from our own data. When you go and watch a YouTube video, you pay with data. You pay with your privacy. They profile on what you're interested in. For example, you're watching cat videos, so they know you're interested in cats. And the benefit to you is that you can watch cat videos without paying money. So that's the way it works. And it's interesting to think about this, because when web was young, it wasn't obvious that this is going to be the way we pay for content. I set up the first website for F-Secure in April 1994. In 1994, almost nobody had websites. Our website was the 17th website in Finland. So it was a handful of universities which had a website, and then we set up our website. But we already realized back then, in 1994, that this web thing is going to become a big deal because it was so easy to use. You just use your mouse and you click on links. Anybody could use this. This is going to become popular. Eventually there will be tons of websites. Eventually there will be even websites which have things like, the weather report, or will tell you news, or maybe even have videos online. Well, we were having discussions like this in 1994. But then we realized that, hold on, why would anybody put any content online for free? They won't do that. People have to be able to pay. So we thought that maybe the browsers will have a pay button. So there's a button you can click to pay. I want to read that news article. And here I click this button, I'm paying 2 cents to read that article. Well, now it's 2017, and we still don't have that button. There is still no easy way for us to pay for content. And instead of paying with money, this completely new way of paying was developed by Google and the others, which is that we don't pay with money. Instead, they profile on who we are and what we do. And of course, it really should be us, the consumers, who owns this data. And right now, it isn't. And the best way to see how it's being used and who buys it is to go to these free services like, Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, and for once use them not as a user, but use them as a customer. And what I mean by that is that I recommend all of you to go today and buy an ad. You can buy an ad on Facebook with $1, so it's very cheap, and it will open your eyes on how this data is being used. Because when you buy an ad, then you can go through the targeting process. I want to show my ad to people living in Madrid, on the west side of Madrid, who are between 22 and 24 years old, who are female, who are interested in fishing, and who live in a household which has an income of more than $100,000, who are also pregnant. And I'm not cheating you. You can actually do this. This is the level of targeting that you can do in Facebook, in Twitter, in LinkedIn. This is what the data is used for. This is how it works. And that's the homework for all of you for today. Go and buy an ad. All right? Do we still have time? What?
Hello. Thank you for the very interesting presentation. I wanted to know your opinion on hardware security. For instance, pretty much every CPU today has a management mode and firmware it can't examine. So for instance, I realized that if I were to buy a computer today, I can't be sure that it's not going to have some kind of firmware level management mode that I have no control over. How do I firewall something off when there's nothing to firewall it with?
There is no way to do that. We simply have to blindly trust our hardware vendors. Because the code complexity of modern CPUs is massive, the code complexity of modern GPUs is even much, much more massive. There's no way for any single user to figure out everything that's going on inside their CPUs. And that is a problem. So how do we know that there's no backdoor, let's say in Intel chips, which Intel could enable, for example, during times of crisis or war? Well, we actually don't know that. There's no easy way to figure it out. There's maybe no possible way of figuring it out. And it's quite interesting, actually. The last time I checked, Intel, which is the largest CPU manufacturer on the planet, they have chip fabrication plants around the world, making, for example, GPUs and auxiliary processors. But all of their CPU factories are actually physically inside the United States. That's not probably the cheapest place to build CPUs, but for some reason they built them all inside USA. And you can use that to start conspiracy theories or not, I don't know about that, but it does make us wonder. So is this a problem? Yes, it is. But in a way, it's not really different from the problem that we already have with our operating systems. Most people run on their computers either OS X or Microsoft Windows. And there's no way for you to figure out everything that's inside those operating systems either. Well, in fact, if you run Linux, there's really no way of knowing that either, because there's way too much code for anybody to go through and figure out, which is nicely illustrated by the big vulnerabilities which we found from Linux kernel over the last couple of years, some of which were there for a decade and nobody noticed. So it is a hard problem. And the only way to fix this in long term is to do better security engineering. There are no easy solutions.
I have a final one.
Okay.
The hands-on guy in the room, okay? Do you know the strategy Sony and several companies are following, that they are trying to push a model where they don't sell you the hardware, but they give you a license of use of the hardware? What is the scenario if you sign a license, but you don't own the hardware, you cannot patch, touch, modify, hack, or whatever?
That policy sucks. To put it in a nutshell, when we go and buy things, we expect to own them. This is happening not just with home appliances, it's happening with things like vehicles. And there was a lawsuit case in the United States where a tractor manufacturer was suing their own customers because they were fixing their tractors by themselves instead of taking them to official repair shop. So we are entering new discussions about who actually owns the things that we buy. And with this bright new future of IoT, almost every single server or every single appliance needs a server somewhere in the cloud. And those servers will not run forever. When you buy a washing machine, you assume you will be able to use it for decades. But that server somewhere in AWS cloud probably won't be there in 30 years, after which your washing machine might not work. And that is also something we have to demand from our vendors. We have to demand that they fail in a way that allows us to keep using them. Even though the back-end servers go away, we still must be able to use our devices in an offline mode. And that's probably easier said than done. But that's another challenge for all of us to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tenemos ahora el descanso, vamos muy bien de tiempo, tomáoslo con calma. Thank you, Mikko.